Okay, hi there. Welcome to our discussion of ethics and ethnic studies. I'm Andrew Fiala, and I am the director of the Ethics Center here at Fresno State. And this is our online version of the Leon S. Peters Ethics Lecture Series. So I'm glad that you all could join us today. We have some expert speakers who are going to talk to us about ethical issues related to the new ethnic studies curriculum. And I think it'll be a really fun conversation. So I'm going to do a couple quick introductions and then I'll get out of the way and I'm going to let our speakers speak. So first I want to make sure we thank the Leon S. Peters Foundation, which supports this, and they've been supporting us for years now. So if we were all together, I'd say let's give them a round of applause. But anyway, thank you to the Leon S. Peters Foundation. And then also like to thank Belle Vang, who is behind the scenes doing she's coordinating the video and she's sending this out live on Facebook and so on. And then I'd also like to say thanks to Professor James Rocha and Professor Jenny Bond, who I coordinated with as we were planning this program. So we've had a lot of interesting insight and support. So here's the vision of this conversation, and then I'll introduce our speakers. So as most of you probably know, beginning in fall of 2021, the CSU system is going to be requiring an ethnic studies course as part of general education across the whole CSU system. It's going to be called Area F. It's kind of cool, it's innovative, it's exciting, a new change, a big change actually to the curriculum. And I know there's a lot of folks around the state who've been working on this, including some of our colleagues who are going to talk with us today. They can fill in some details, but the gist of it is that students are going to take one course from one of 4 ethnic studies areas, which could include Native American studies, African American studies, Asian American studies, or Latino and Latina American studies. That's going to be interesting and it's new. So my question for our panelists is what are the values involved in this? Why does it matter today? What kinds of ethical issues are involved in thinking about this transition? And how do we get students involved, or how can the community get involved? So let me introduce our panelists now. We're waiting for one panelist to join us, but we have with us Thomas Witt Ellis, who holds the rank of full professor of theater at CSU Fresno, and who was appointed by the United States Senate to serve as a Fulbright Scholar at the National Taiwan University. He has directed numerous productions, including El Hajj Malik at the National Theater of Nigeria in Lagos, Death and the Maiden at the Van Troy Theater in Santiago de Cuba, David Henry Huang's Golden Child at the Novell Hall Theater in Taipei, Taiwan, and he currently serves as program coordinator of the Africana Studies program and oversees the Black Theater program at Cal State Fresno. We also have with us Dr. Leece Lee-Oliver, who is an assistant professor in the Women's Gender and Sexuality Department, as well as American Indian Studies. She's also the director of the American Indian Studies program. Her research focuses on American Indian sovereignty movements, decolonialism and law, and transnational and women of color feminisms. Dr. Lee-Oliver graduated with her PhD in ethnic studies from the University of California, Berkeley, and has been engaged in the struggle for educational equity and ethnic studies and women of color feminisms for 2 decades. I'm going to also introduce Luis Fernando Macias. He's an assistant professor in Chicano and Latin American studies at Fresno State. His research focuses on student-led movements, theories of Latinidad, the intersections of race and immigration status, particularly as it relates to immigrant youth's access to education. We're hoping that Luis will join us. We got a communication from him that he was at him. Oh, he's here. Hey, welcome. Okay, and we want to make sure that you can unmute your microphone. So thank you for joining us. Okay, so I'm going to throw out the first question and we'll let Thomas start us off. So the question is, oh, by the way, before we start, if you're out in the audience and you have a question or a comment, please put it into the chat. So I'll keep my eye on the chat function and then I'll make sure we get the questions to the panelists, okay? So the first question, what are the key values that motivate your own work in ethnic studies and on the project of promoting the ethnic studies curriculum. How did you come to this work? Why it is important to you, and how does it connect to your fundamental values? Professor Ellis.
Thank you. Thank you for having me. Thank you for having me. I think maybe I might be the only one on the panel that's a working artist. So, you know, I'm surrounded by scholars by trade, and I'm not exactly a scholar, I'm an artist. And I think that perspective is the wagon that I'm riding into ethnic studies on. Many years ago, when I was an undergrad at Sac State, we had a plethora of courses in what was then Pan-African Studies, and that included a number of classes in that were purely academic: history, social science, etc. But we also had a number of courses in visual art, theater, dance, photography, music, and all of those courses were also ethnic studies courses. And so we had a really cool blend of academics and art that the students, I myself am a product of that, because I chose to go into theater because we had a Black theater program, but that Black theater program was housed in ethnic studies. So over the years, at least here at this institution, over the years, the symbiotic nature of art and academics has kind of lost its cohesion. We don't have a number of courses, at least in Africana Studies, and I don't know about the other ones, but one of the things I'd like to see come back is a greater push to include aesthetics. Now, keep in mind, I'm not talking about literature. We have African-American literature. Dr. Shuttler, I think, teaches a class in that. Dr. Walden taught a class in that for many, many years. So we are pushing to include literature. But as I mentioned, there are a number of other subjects in the field of the arts, the applied arts, that I would like to see kind of included. But to answer your question, that's kind of my area, Africana Studies by virtue of Black theater, which includes the voices and sensibilities and values of Black Americans as expressed through film, television, and theater. So I think we're doing a very good job in what we do, and if we were to add anything, I would like to see that push take place. And by the way, the African American Gospel Choir came out of ethnic studies. That's kind of in kind of a dormant state right now, but I certainly would like to see other courses that would be involved in the arts and in the academics. Am I making sense at all? I'm going to give the rest of my time to my colleagues.
Professor Lee-Oliver, you want to join in next?
Yeah, thank you so much. Okinexiko and Nitsinitaki. My name is Leece Lee-Oliver. I thank everyone for the time today. I really to share in this important discussion. I'm really glad to be following you, Dr. Ellis, because you reminded me of some really important points in all of this, which is this connectivity between the way people express life and politics, the way we express all sorts of histories about our people that are not taught in the university system, is part of the work of ethnic studies. It is Black studies so named as the first step towards ethnic studies in its original form, and Native American studies, Chicano studies, in particular Chicano studies, and Asian American studies, that all came together, and people, you know, worked collaboratively, and we learned a lot, considering it was the 1960s, to take those cues about how to come together in in your group, sort of what Gayatri Spivak calls strategic essentialism, right? Is like you come together with those who are in the same fight you are, and then you move into coming together in larger coalitional movements to build solidarity and build strength together with all your many fine-tuned parts. And so for me, key elements of what's important in ethnic studies came first and foremost from my own life, because I was raised by a single mother who was a civil rights activist. She was an award-winning artist and poet. She very much saw a great space of communicating politics through her art and through her poetry. And we were around musicians all the time. And I thought when I was a little kid that I would be a musician, because that's where I would be able to carry on that tradition of speaking publicly about politics and trying to bring soundness to the world through messages of the importance of humane treatment of one another. And that was really big to me as a little kid because I was surrounded by it. I grew up in a household that was very political, and at the same time, not everybody agreed with each other and often were fundamentally opposed. But there was this really base level of respect for the autonomy of each individual. And I think that comes out of my Native American heritage. I'm Blackfeet and Choctaw. And that type of personal autonomy, right? That you stand up and you have something to say, right? And that the people around you believe you have something to say, whether they agree or not is their right, but to shut you down is not. And that kind of fundamental sort of ethical way of treating human agency, right, was something that when I got into ethnic studies, I went through anthropology, and I kept feeling very silenced. And I kept seeing and hearing about research on my own people and indigenous people around the world that always put the visiting anthropologist as the observer expert on the people. And so it felt a lot like zoology to me. And it didn't feel right. And it didn't honor the people as teachers of the anthropologist. So there was sort of this natural progression to find space where people honored each other's intellectual capacity and vision, and where teachers saw us as bringing in something to work with, right? And building that. And ethnic studies is fundamentally built on the idea that each individual walks a life and is navigating and learning about systems of oppression and systems of privilege. And from there we build onto that, and we go into decolonial studies and different ways of sort of interpreting and unpacking powers that be in the world and that create limitations and that create avenues for some people. So I found ethnic studies to be a place where I could do political change, where, in the words of Ronald Takaki, you build knowledge from the ground up. You go to the community and you learn from the community, which means you also honor the community members as teachers, as educators, with or without degrees. And so ethnic studies helps me navigate my home and community life in a way where if I'm in our Native American community here or in my old home community where I moved here from, there's a lot of teasing. Like right when I got my PhD, one of my old mentors came up to me, and he had a PhD, but we were just in the line at the we're getting food, and he walked up and just jokingly put his hand out and said, "How are you doing, Doc?" I wasn't married yet, so he said, "How are you doing, Dr. Lee?" And I looked at him and we just busted out laughing, because in that place of the longhouse, right, the hierarchies of those worlds don't matter. Most of the people in that space, almost all, I would say, except for a very few elders, never went to college, and they are the wisdom keepers. And so just the last point, I would say that my home life, my community life, the richness of it, the knowledge, and then going into the classroom, and it's absent was so shocking for me as an undergrad that when I went to grad school the first time around, I went into an international studies program with an Indigenous cultural survival center, research center. And I was taken in and allowed to help build that center. And that was a turning point. And from there, I went into ethnic studies, where I saw that what I already knew and what the university seemed to know could come together and build to create spaces where education becomes a form of liberation, right? And that's my goal. And I was taught to expect that in home, and ethnic studies lets me do that in the academy. Thank you for your time, everybody.
That's great. Luis, would you like to join in now? And welcome to our discussion. I'm glad you made it.
Thank you for the invitation, and I appreciate you all being here, and I'm honored to share the digital panel with some of my esteemed colleagues. I've been taking notes on some of the really important things that my colleagues have been saying, and I would like to feed off of that to answer the question on what are the key values that motivate us in this ethnic studies work. And I appreciate it very much Professor Ellis talking about the values and sensibilities of communities and how that is to be represented in the classroom. And I'm thinking right now of Angela Valenzuela, who talks about educación versus education. So this idea of education is schooling. It's schooling, where educación is a more holistic view of the person. It takes your academic along with your responsibilities to the community, along with even your manners, your way of presenting yourself. So for me, ethnic studies is doing that. It's connecting the sensibilities, the values, along with the academic rigor, because we spend so much of our time in these academic spaces, in these walls. We dedicate so much time to reading, to becoming professionals, that oftentimes the humanity is lost. And the humanity is what should be at the forefront of ethnic studies. It's that idea of camaraderie. It's the idea of shared struggle. It's the idea of shared agency, but also respecting one another's differences. That brings me to doing my work with ethnic studies. To talk a little bit more about why is this so fundamental in terms of curriculum, it's because oftentimes a lot of our community members will seek a college education as the way for upward social mobility. And they will be fed this idea that in order for you to be upward socially mobile, you have to turn your back on your communities. You have to assimilate. You have to erase the parts that made you in order to be a better you. And that could not be further from the truth. That could absolutely not be further from the truth. So our goal in Chicano studies, as well as knowing in larger ethnic studies colleagues, departments, is to make sure that that is intact and that is in whole, while at the same time holding our students and ourselves accountable for academic rigor, because this is going to be something that is going to be challenged time and time and time again. And every time you enter a space as an ethnic studies scholar, there's this underlying notion that you have to defend your expertise and you have to defend your knowledge. So making sure that nobody can test you, and if they do, that they'll quickly regret why they did it in the first place, is part of why I am, personally speaking, so strict with my students, because I want to further exemplify the realities that they will encounter, because I myself encountered them and continue to encounter them. So for me, it's a matter of personal. And personal is what I hope that my students bring to their class. I hope that they don't disconnect that when they enter my classroom and their hopeful choice to declare an ethnic studies major at one point.
Hey, let me, I have a question in the chat, and I can throw this to you, and then whoever wants to respond. So Julie says, as the generations evolve, there are different generations, and how do we manage with differences and changes and conflicts from one generation to another within the I think she's suggesting within the context of an ethnic group or organization. And Leece, I heard you actually suggesting this, right? There's like a generational issue. Any of you want to comment on that question? And let me just also ask other folks, if you're watching, you want to throw a question to the chat, feel free. Thomas?
Andrew, I put my photograph up just now. I put that up because I was in the process of writing Julie back directly And what I was going to say is that I should pull that back up. One of the things that we have an opportunity to do as we're designing the ethnic studies, the new courses in ethnic studies as a result of AB 1460. One of the things that we can, that I'd like to see us do is create a curriculum that includes a kind of cross-pollinization between ethnic minorities. For example, you know, I'm a native Californian, but I've lived all over the country and the world. But in my experience growing up in Sacramento, I lived in LA, I lived here. For example, we have Blacks, we have Asians, and we have the Latino communities, and all these communities are in separate silos. There are very few opportunities for, except at the college level, where faculty build coalitions for various reasons, usually for survival, but we don't really have, we're not encouraged to do programs and projects within these communities. Let me just digress for just a second. The California Arts Council, which is a state agency that funds arts projects, several years ago, they put out a request for proposals, so to speak, that did this very thing, that allowed, they were going to fund projects, artistic projects that combine two or more ethnic groups in order to do some sort of project. And I could go into a lot of detail about that, but those projects were very well conceived all over the state, and they were well executed. And I would like to see I challenge the university to encourage the same thing among faculty, so that students benefit from such courses, because we live in probably one of the most diverse cultures in the country, but states in the country, but we're not really encouraged to, interact with one another officially. So that's one of the things that I would like to see. And I think that would help each group learn more about each group. And that would be a generational thing. I mean, if we're doing that in high school, high schoolers carry that with them into college and beyond.
Please go ahead.
I would add to, one thing I want to say is, there's, these conversations are so wonderful to have, and we could have them once a week all semester long, just on this set of questions, and probably still feel like, oh, there's so much left to say. So I just want to say that, I believe that everything that everybody's saying are pieces of the actual fabric of the truth of why ethnic studies matters, right? There's no one or another idea that's better than the other. We're telling between three of us here with a great moderator, we're telling a set of stories that all intertwine. And generationally speaking, I mean, we have to step back sometimes and just think, what is an education about? What is education for? We call it a great equalizer, and yet where do we learn about social justice? Because inherent in that notion of a great equalizer is suggesting that how we come out with a better chance at an equitable life, access to better equity. And in that, how do we understand what is equitable, inequitable? Generational changes happen. Technology changes over generations, sometimes fast, sometimes slow. If you look at the Valley here, in the 50s, they thought it was a fantastic idea to drain the largest lake west of the Mississippi to create a prosperous agricultural system in this valley. We are a place that is considered one of the better feeders of the world, and yet a lot of our people go hungry here and face food insecurity. And those are two different things. Being hungry every day and not being able to access healthy food are two different things. And these are things we talk about in ethnic studies in terms of food sovereignty. So food sovereignty does what Dr. Ellis is talking about, where you go into one field and you can think about food sovereignty, land rights, Native American treaties, land loss, land gaining, right? You can also go work with environmental scientists and think about water quality after you have pulled clean water out of the ground. put pesticides on the earth and then affected that aquifer. It's generations now that are dealing with the reality of those changes. In the 50s, there wasn't quite the same immediate effect, right? But who better to talk to us about what it's like to live in the wealthiest in terms of food system almost in the world, right? And California has some of the highest rates of eco diversity. Of course, there's other places in Latin America and other countries as well. Where better to learn but on the ground in it? Where better to learn how to affect positive change with aquifers? All the way to thinking about what we call food deserts, right? So food deserts are in places where a community, you can have a large population and you can have a really long way to go to get to some store that sells vegetables and fruits and good, clean produce, meats and things like that. If your best food source is a corner market, then you're going to pay $7 for, a gallon of milk, right? So my students who are here know that you hear me say in the classroom, it's very expensive to be poor, right? These are things I learned in ethnic studies because we look at structural systems, but those structural systems, you can't just freeze life in a time, right? And then only teach to that. And that's generationally, we need to rely on those people coming after us to say, yeah, but life's not like that. When I teach in my feminist studies classes and I ask people to talk about what does sexism look like today, right? Or with my women of color feminist classes, and they'll say, yeah, but men of color are dealing with types of sexism that are different, right? When we do that, when we stay current, this is something that decolonialism allows us to do. We gotta be really engaged and interested in staying current and listening for the changes that are happening. We can learn what's happening in society, right? Because in academia, it's easy to get stagnant. And I'll leave it on this. One of the things my mom was just such a freaking brilliant person. And one of the things she said to me, when I was an undergrad, I was reading and we were having a garage sale because my sister needed to make some money and she was getting ready to move, right? Just basic, practical, everyday life, right? And I was sitting on the couch reading and I called to the kitchen because they were making food for everybody who was helping, typical for my family. And I read and said, what does this word mean? And it's my mom and sister, right, who said, oh, that means such and such. And they explained what I was reading to me without even looking at the page. But who was going to college, right? Who was going to college, right? And who wasn't helping in the garage sale in that moment? So they told me what it meant. And then my mom said, can you come in here and stir the beans? And I said, yeah, I can come in, yeah. And then I heard my sister say, who's watching the little box that she had money in? And I thought, oh no, my 7-year-old niece. So I went in the kitchen and my mom, before I got there, my mom came around the corner and she looked at me and she said, you need to be careful. And I said, what do you mean? And she said, because you're going to read so much so fast while you're going to school, and you're going to have to repeat stuff to your teachers to get a good grade, that you're likely going to say things you never even thought about, whether you believe or not, right? And the thing about ethnic studies is it demands that we take up a decolonialism in the work, that we stay current, that we knock off false hierarchies that say, I'm an expert, what more is there for me to learn? And that we treat the students, those generation after generation coming in, right, as people who also come to the table with knowledge to share. Thank you.
Luis, do you want to come in on this question of generational challenges? And then I'm wondering if also we could sort of switch and just head towards the second question, which is about real world challenges for our students, for this curriculum. And I mean, we could talk about the national level, the international, we could talk about the local, and Leece, you already hit on some of the issues in terms of, we know, issues that our own students are facing in terms of food insecurity and so on. Anyway, Luis, I'd like to invite you.
Absolutely, and I'll try to do one better and provide a segue into both. because the conversation that, the question that Julie posed is the central tenet of ethnic studies. It's one of the, if not the only discipline that requires us to be linked with our community. It requires whatever is being taught in these spaces to serve as those in the community and vice versa. So what's so exciting about, many of the things are exciting about this opportunity, but one of the things that is very exciting about this opportunity is if we are able to formalize the curriculum, institutionalize these courses so that they are secure to not have to make a certain number of students, to make attendance, to make requirements. If we are able to facilitate all that, then we can really open up the doors to what it's intended to do, such as having guest speakers from the community come into the classrooms and tell the students their experiences, tell the students what it was like on particular issues that they have corporal, like physiological knowledge about. Like they were there when we were protesting Prop 187. They were there when there were different marches going on. Like you couldn't read that and have the same kind of knowledge as when you were right there. So when we're able to take, yes, the academic rigorous, like, okay, what does this scholar say about this? How does this connect to that? And when we can have that alongside equally as important knowledge, somebody was on the ground, somebody that helped organize, somebody that was fundamental to even the symbolism behind the movements. Dr. Herrera, my colleague, I believe she's in attendance. She shares a story with some of the students that then relay it back to my class when we're talking about the Chicano studies movement, when they say that, oh, well, oftentimes we don't hear Chicanas being represented in the movement, in discussions of movement. And then she shares a wonderful story. I won't swag her story, but when she says that the story about like, who do you think was making all the brown berets for the brown berets? Who do you think was putting those together? It was the women. So it was the women that are giving all the credit, but none of the credit at the same time. So having a bridge between the community and academia is so important. And it's such a high, such an opportune time for us to be able to incorporate that into this AB 1460 that right now there's a lot of discussion around. I was a few minutes late to this because I was in a previous meeting that was discussing it as well. And some of the challenges are going to be some of the opportunities as well. How is it that we can seize this opportunity that it's going to be once in a half lifetime or once in a lifetime opportunity, really? How can we seize this opportunity to live up to the tenets of what our folks that struggled in the 60s, 70s, 80s, and 90s? How is it that we can honor their legacy and put our own stamp on it? And I think part of that is going to be to incorporate the community's voice into it, which include our elders, our previous generations, and the generations that are currently right now figuring out their own reality. How is it that they can have a conversation with the previous generations and inform them about some of the realities that they may not have been privy to then, but are happening right now?
Thomas, how about you? We have you on mute. There you go.
I think my colleagues really captured everything. I don't have much to offer to add to that. I think that I agree 100%. Yeah.
What could you offer in terms of challenges? You know, the challenges national, locally, or and university level challenges too. I mean, there's this is not going to be a seamless process. I assume that there's going to be pushback.
One of the things that we discussed in our pre-discussion is that, and I'm not on the committees that are closely monitoring this, like Luis and Maida and some others, but I think that we should be very careful about the evaluation process, that whatever we start, let me back up. One of the complaints that I've been hearing from my colleagues is that the rush to AB 1460 is being rushed into a bit too quickly, that we're not getting a chance to catch our breath as we're designing the curriculum. And be that as it may, I think that the evaluation process should be first, front and center, because the curriculum, whatever we come up with, is a living, breathing kind of animal. And whatever we come up with for the first year, we are constantly reinventing that to make it better, to make it more inclusive, to make it more effective. as Luis mentioned, to get more the community involved even more, to partner with service learning so that we make sure that students get the proper amount of credit for going into community organizations and working. Luis touched on something that I've talked to with my students, and we have what we call national treasures. John Lewis just passed away. He was a national treasure. But we also have local treasures, regional treasures. And just piggybacking on what Luis said, they should be a part of our curriculum. They should be in our classrooms talking about their experiences. I just hope that when we are developing the curriculum that we have room for that, because it makes all the sense in the world, and it helps us to deliver these processes to our students and to the community.
Can I bring in something from the chat here? So Elizabeth Rocha Zuniga says, we talk about ending discrimination and expanding opportunities. AB 1460 is now a law. How will this connect? This is very, asking you to speculate. How do you think this will connect to Prop 16, which is ending the ban on affirmative action? And conversations about racism in general. I mean, this may be too much to bite into here, but there are these other things are swirling in the world connected somehow to this. Anyone want to make a comment on these?
Andy, very quickly, I'm going to jump in very quickly, and I'm going to jump off. Prop 16, Prop 187, these are last gasp efforts by the opposition to kind of bury these movements. And I think all eyes are watching the state of California. I mentioned this in the pre-discussion. We have to be very careful what we implement, because other states can and will replicate this. We're being the leaders coming from a very diverse state. So we owe it to ourselves and to the rest of the nation to better inform our public. And by the way, the hard right, they don't want to, it's kind of like the devil. They don't want to see good flourish. They want to crush it. And fortunately, we live in a state that they're fading. They are fading, and we need to keep marching because they're moving on to defeat. And I don't mean to sound inspirational, but I think we just need to make sure we do what we do a good way, and we'll be okay.
Leece, you want to?
Yeah, I think I appreciate that. I think we're all in, I think there's probably more people than not who share a desire for more peace of mind, just daily. We have gone through so much. We were going through a lot of this because racism has just been so embedded in the United States. In the culture and television, so has sexism, so has racist sexism, so has homophobia, so has anti-trans, anti-anybody who's not gender conforming. So for me, ethnic studies is a place to start. It's funny to me that we're talking about 3 units out of 120 that undergraduates will be required to take. And yet it's like we're asking for 80% of the university to just transform itself, right? The kinds of pushback have been that's against, intellectual freedoms, it's anti-constitutional. No, you don't have to teach it, but I would like to. It's my, it's not anti, anything. Ethnic studies is about making space for the voices of people who have been cut out. And one of the things I learned in ethnic studies, so to all of the students who are in this fight, I see you, Elizabeth, I see you, Giselle, I see you there. And I'm sure many more of you that are attending this today are part of this students' fight for ethnic studies. And one of the most important things I learned was something that I already learned at home, but I saw in writing, and I saw the proof, and I saw the laws and the structure, how these things get you know, using words to knit them into laws to make either things possible or impossible. That's the power of words and laws. And one of them is that the original university was not intended to incorporate the voices of all people. The original, which is today our modern university system, is based on a bedrock of something that was for white, patriarchal, elite, heteronormative performing, I will say, because what people do in their private lives is very different than what they do publicly when it's not safe. Gloria Anzaldúa talks about that with the interstitial spaces. I will hide the parts of me, whether it's my language, right, my sexuality. You know, people blame lighter skinned people like, oh, you can pass as white. You know, these are important conversations to have. Why do we have that tension over light to brown to dark skin? These are things we can study in ethnic studies. We talk about why these things matter. Brown bag rules, brown bags hanging outside of buildings. So you either were that color or darker, you didn't go in. And that could be a church. This is history. This is the United States that we study, right? Through the elements of racialization and then the intersectional ways, like through critical race theory and Kimberly Crenshaw, all those ways that laws map onto the body or use the body itself to say, these are your characteristics, these are the doors open to you, and these are the doors closed to you, right? And those who have all the doors open to them are fewer and fewer, right? That's what we talk about in ethnic studies. That's what we teach about in ethnic studies. And we teach about these remarkable human beings who defy all odds and work past the closed doors and get them open not only for themselves, but for others. It sets a standard of accountability, right? And so we're talking about moving the university, the culture of the idea that we have about who carries knowledge and whose knowledge matters, right? And so the fight is upon us because of that, because it challenges people's comfort that the world is the way it is out of natural tendencies, not human monitoring and manipulation, right? This is why one of the key theories in ethnic studies is social construction. What does it mean to say things are socially, race as a social construction, right? So I think that this is what's upon us. This is why it's challenging. And what we're all about right now is envisioning in 2020, no less, in 2020, and I will just say the time is now. It is now to vote. In 2020, we actually witnessed, those of us who happened to be home or on a device, we witnessed what we knew was happening, which was that an innocent Black man was killed in front of people in broad daylight without any justice whatsoever, presuming him innocent or even questioning his innocence. And a nation with many people who went, I'm not sure. Was he guilty? I remember one of the first things I spoke back to somebody who said something about rioting. I said, if your attention right now is on rioting, less than 24 hours after we all had to bear witness to this man be killed, with the cop looking at us in the eyes as he did it calmly. If your concern is about writing in this moment, less than 24 hours later, we have some talking to do. We have some thinking to do, right? In ethnic studies, one of the reasons that I think it is so challenging not for us, we get it, we're just trying to figure out how to do it, how to implement it on a campus that doesn't right now have an ethnic studies program. It's not easy to do, but it's possible, right? So the struggle we have here at Fresno State is that there are challenges and we have work to do. And there's a system in place in the law, right, where the law provides that the Ethnic Studies Council, large representation of ethnic studies faculty throughout the CSU, is the expert in building the curriculum. The Academic Senate then approves and makes sure that that fits within the curricular standards of the university. And then the Chancellor's office says, all right, I believe in you, and now I will check this box, right? I will sign so that this goes through to our universities. And instead, like so many people in the United States, we are all experiencing that we hit tar in the road, right? It's becoming really challenging to implement it throughout the CSU. We have the law is super simple, it's 3 pages long, super basic, super easy to understand, very straightforward. So ethnic studies equips us with the right questions, with the ability to look at where are we hitting the tar? Why is there a struggle when it looks simple, right? And I think it's that we are envisioning what education means to us, and we're actually claiming it as a right. We have the right to learn about the world as it is, not the narrow window of those who have had power to write history books up until 1940. So again, I thank everybody for your time. I'm pretty sure we're preaching to the choir, as Thomas said, but
well, sometimes the choir needs preaching too. There's sort of like, let's hear it one more time. I think it's useful. Leece, thank you. I mean, you're giving me a lot to think about as we move here. We're here. We got about 15 minutes left of our time. So there's a question in the chat, and this might help a transition to the third question I had posed to our panelists. So the question in the chat says, it's from a student who's majoring in Chicano studies, Alondra. And she says, how important is it for students to take courses outside of their major? So student who's majoring in Chicano studies to take courses in Africana studies, women's studies, and so on. And the question I had posed to the group, our third question is, what can students do? How can students get involved in this? What advice do you have for students? And Luis, maybe we'll throw this one to you first. What about students, and what about Alondra in specific?
I want to acknowledge Elizabeth's question and Alondra's question, because both are intertwined. So I've had the pleasure of having Elizabeth in my class, and she always asks these very thoughtful questions. So it came as no surprise. So to answer to her and dovetailing it to Alondra's question, it's important to recognize, as Lee said, just what 3 credits out of 120 something is doing. This is creating a systemic shock. This thing, like, we're just asking for one class out of all these, just one class. So you could see the potential that these courses have. Now, it's important for us to recognize that this potential is also going to be felt like a rippling effect, because by instituting courses like these, we're now asking for more resources to hire folks that look like us, to teach courses for us, that have content knowledge in these kinds of things. And that's asking the institutions to put their money where their mouth is. And there's nothing scarier to them than when you say, okay, you've stopped talking to me to death, now it's time for you to put into action. That is when things get really, really messy, in a good way. We like being messy. We like being messy. So to add to that comment, I think of my perspective in terms of a rotating epicenter. In order for us to be true to the core of our ethnic studies training and our ethnic studies perspective, is we must treat this as a rotating epicenter in which we take a course, we have conversations, we put ourselves in spaces that, with the welcoming of others, we enter a different perspective on marginalized communities, to see their strengths, to see the challenges. And in doing so, we're able to see much stronger connections between our struggle and theirs. We're able to see the larger picture. And that's where you will have the most beautiful holistic view of what it means to be a person that is constantly fighting against something in the United States. And again, have that be part of your education. That informs all other forms of professional training. You go from a social worker to a politician, to a doctor, to even an engineer, to even a mathematician, because it opens up your way of thinking in a way that is like ice cold water to the body. You're like, I didn't know that this was possible. This is what courses like this offer. And it's tough and it's challenging. And as Thomas said, it is going to be a verb right? Ethnic studies will have to be a verb. It's going to have to be in flow. It's going to have to be in dialogue. It's going to have to be fluid for us to really, really, really get it off the ground and have it be as impactful as we know it can be.
Thomas, do you want to come in now? And let me just encourage our audience. We have about 10 minutes left, and if there's any comments or questions, throw them into the chat. We want to make sure our panel gets a chance to respond. Thomas, how about you with what can students do and what can students take away? And how much cold water to the system do we need? I like that, Luis, I like that comment. I think you're on mute, Thomas.
Sorry, I hate that when my colleagues do that. I think the students, one of the things that the students can do is help us with recruitment. Students have social media at their disposal. We need more soldiers. We are fighting a war of ignorance. We need more foot soldiers, not just the students that are connected, that are intelligent, that are involved right now at this panel, but their friends and the friends of their friends. The students are very influential. And it's not just to get our enrollment numbers up, but more students need to come to classes. More students need to be involved. And I think student recruiters are probably as effective or more so than faculty recruiters. So I think that's one of that's an onus that we're kind of putting back on the backs of the students, that get the word out, get more people involved.
Thanks, Thomas. Leece, maybe a quick comment on this, and then I want to invite our three panelists to offer a concluding thought before we run out of time. And Leece, I want to invite you on the student piece. How can students get involved? And then the concluding question will be, what are your hopes and dreams about all of this? Leece, please.
Yeah, that's great. So for students, y'all are brilliant. I mean, this is a lot of what happened with 1460 is because of you. Faculty, we have been pushing. I've been in ethnic studies forever, and people I've spoken with, I did a whole special issue with the Ethnic Studies Review. Lenita Warjack, some of the founders of ethnic studies are in there, and it sounds like they're having the same conversation we're having today. So keep it up, and yes, more, right? More of that, and push on your university. We have a right, you have a right to a decent, meaningful education that helps you do good work that you feel good about. And yes, it's tough. It's not easy. World history is not easy, but this is where you'd learn about why affirmative action existed. I think affirmative action is really important, and it was intended to level a playing field, but it was also a bit problematic because it included the notion that race is real. Racism is real. The idea of race is not. It's a false piece of ugly biological warfare that was created a long time ago in the 1500s, 1400s. Mm-hmm. You learn that, right? So empower yourself. And what I would say is that what my esteemed, very wonderful colleagues have really been sharing too is what the Dalai Lama has spoken on a number of times, which is we need to teach empathy. Why take classes from different people? Why come over to the Ethics Center? Because you're deepening your own humanity, and there's less division, right? So I have my heritage. I teach about Black Indians is what the title in the field is, right? Because there's all of this integration between all of us. Human life is messy and complicated in really beautiful ways. So learn about revolutionary love and start practicing it, and come into our ethnic studies classes, and I'll be happy to see you.
I love it, revolutionary love. That's inspiring. We're heading towards a conclusion. Let me ask Belle Belle, could you throw into the chat the information about we're going to have a discussion with students next Monday. So we're going to get the student view next Monday in part, kind of connected to this. And then let me, Leece, we could start with you again, and then maybe Leece, Thomas, and Luis. And let me just ask for some concluding thoughts, your hopes, your fears, and then we'll draw our time here to a close. Leece?
All righty. So yes, checking in with your ethnic studies. Take a class in each department. Learn who some of the critical thinkers were that empower our fields. W.E.B. Du Bois, who was one of the first to say, right, you cannot deny a people their humanity because humans have souls. And that was the measure to deny Black and African American and Native American people rights, was based on that they weren't quite the same kind of human as a white European, right? Come and learn from who these core figures are. Gloria Anzaldúa, right? Who give this life to our fields, because they're not with us anymore, but you matter and I matter to them, is why they did the work that they did. So I have hope. I think we were asked to think about, like, what are your hopes and fears for the future? I think we probably all pretty much share fears, so I won't really go into belaboring those. But my hope is in the power of the people, man. I have studied genocide back to the 1300s. I've studied Nazism inside and out because as a kid I needed to understand. I couldn't believe people did that to each other, even growing up with the knowledge I had about my family. And my family history. So the power of the people to come back and be funny and be loving and to be kind tells us something about the power of humanity, and that gives me hope.
Thomas?
Are we talking about fears?
Or hope?
I think one of the first steps, the pre-steps to populating AB 1460 with students. One of the things that I think faculty can do is to connect to high schools and and when I say high schools, I mean from the top down, from the county office of education that oversees all the districts, all the way to local teachers, because a large percentage of our students that are taking, the ethnic studies requirement are not going to be people of color. And, these are going to be the sons and daughters of prominent farmers, prominent Trump supporters. And they're going to come in with, they are probably going to be as important to educate as members of our own communities. But we need to get them in there, and we need to encourage schools to, either they're going to come in willfully and by their own volition, or they're going to come in with a chip on their shoulder. And any of you that have ever taught GE courses, you know that a lot, well, with me, our GE courses are in the arts, and, a lot of business majors, engineering majors, they're always talking about, why do I have to take this course in music appreciation? I'm not going to need it when I go to work for IBM, but you're going to need it for humanity. So I think that if we can help get some of the districts knowledgeable, there are partners, there are natural partners. They need to equip their students with a life on campus, not just here, but any CSU. So I think that's one of the first steps that I think that we don't talk about, that we probably need to look into.
Thank you, Thomas. Luis, how about a parting comment from you?
Absolutely. And Thomas, that's very funny that you say that, because my quip to students that say that is usually like, do you or do you not want to be the most interesting person at a party? If so, then keep taking classes like these, right? Rather than talking about the same old thing.
Yeah.
But my fears are co-optation. My fears are co-optation. My fear is that ethnic studies will be co-opted and that it will be diluted into something that it is not. But my hope is that we are have trained and have been trained by people who know better and that don't let themselves be pushed around. And it's important for us to look at the wider picture, look at the bigger picture, and how is it that this is going to impact not just our communities, but other communities that are impacted by it, and be in dialogue with one another to make sure that the implementation, the design, and its impact is equitable across all communities that have fought hard for this. So that's my hope, and I'm just overjoyed at the amount of work that is being put into this, that people have put into it, that has been in certain segments led by students. And anytime there's a major educational shift, it has been forefronted by students. So this is just another one of those examples. And I thank you all for the invitation, your attention, and I'm sure that my contact information is available through the Ethics Center announcement. So please feel free to reach out if you want to continue having these dialogues. It would be my pleasure.
Thank you, Luis. We will, so this is now going to be a video available on Facebook. We'll also put it on our YouTube channel, and we'll put links in both places so people can get in touch with you all if they want to. Let me just say, I mean, this is a rich conversation, and I'm glad our campus is really embracing this. And there's going to be a lot of work to do, I'm sure, and it's going to be interesting and hopefully enlightening. That's the whole idea here. Right? We want to do better. We want to think better. We want to. And Luis, I heard you the difference between education and schooling, and we need to be about education. And so I just want to thank our panelists, and I learned a lot, and I really appreciate your time and energy. Next Monday, we've got another conversation related to this with some students. And as I said, this is going to be up on Facebook, and we'll put this on our YouTube channel. And keep your ear open to other Ethics Center events. We're going to do something on women's rights and the 100th anniversary of the 19th Amendment in November. So that's on tap for November. Thanks a lot to everybody, and thanks to our guests and to our audience. Best wishes.
Thanks so much.